What if I told you there's a place in America where the government bought out an entire town, sealed the exits, and refuses to explain why it's still burning underground after 6 decades? Not a Netflix thriller. Real life, small town America. We love the fairy tale version, right? Main Street parades, mom and pop diners, neighbors who wave from porches. That's the brochure. But scattered across this country are towns that didn't make the tourism board. Places where something went so wrong that even the people born there tell outsiders, "Don't stop here after sunset." These aren't your typical haunted bed and breakfast tourist traps with overpriced ghost tours. We're talking about real communities that collapsed under the weight of tragedy, toxicity, or something nobody can quite explain. Some are dying slowly, others died fast and refused to stay buried. A few are still technically alive, but you wouldn't want to test that theory. Today we're counting down 10 small American towns that exist in that uncomfortable space between folklore and warning label. You'll hear about the place where an entire generation of children tested positive for lead poisoning. The community where residents just started vanishing into thin air. And the town, yeah, there's actually more than one where people decided living inside a single concrete tower was better than facing what's outside. Think you know creepy small towns? Maybe you've driven through one that felt off. But have you heard about the settlement that's been on fire since Kennedy was president? Or the village where federal agents showed up, evacuated everyone, and then just walked away without finishing the job? By the end of this, you're either going to want to book the weirdest road trip of your life or delete every map app you own. Either way, hit subscribe because the last town on this list has a population of 1, and somehow that's not even the strangest part about it. Let's roll. Number 10, Moonville, Ohio. The tunnel that watches back. There's a railroad tunnel in southeastern Ohio where trains stopped running in 1988, but locals swear something still keeps schedule. Moonville isn't on your GPS. It's not supposed to be. This former coal mining settlement died officially in 1947, but like a lot of places on this list, death seems negotiable here. What remains is a single stone tunnel cutting through the Zaleski State Forest, moss-covered cemetery plots, and enough paranormal activity to keep ghost hunters employed for decades. You can't drive to Moonville. You hike in, through dense woods, past foundations that nature's slowly reclaiming, along trails that feel like they're leading you somewhere you weren't invited. The tunnel itself, about 120 feet of hand-laid brick and shadows, is all that's left of the Marietta and Cincinnati Railroad line. Here's where it gets interesting. For over a century, people have reported seeing a lantern light moving through that tunnel, swinging back and forth like someone's checking the tracks. The local legend centers on a railroad worker, allegedly decapitated in the 1800s while doing his job. Whether that's true or just small-town mythology doesn't really matter anymore. The sightings never stopped. Paranormal investigation teams document cold spots that drop 20 degrees in seconds. Cameras malfunction without explanation. People hear train whistles echo through a tunnel where no trains have run in nearly 4 decades. And here's the part that gets under your skin. Visitors consistently report the same sensation: being watched by something that has no reason to still be there. The population? 0 since the late 1940s. Cell service? Forget it. Your only company out there is whatever decided to stay behind when everyone else left. No streetlights, no convenience stores, no plan B if something goes sideways. Just old stone, thick forest, and the distinct feeling you're trespassing on borrowed time. Moonville isn't scary because it's haunted. It's scary because of what's missing. The absence is louder than anything that could be there. It's the kind of quiet that makes you check over your shoulder every few steps. The kind of empty that doesn't feel empty at all. So yeah, if your ideal Saturday involves hiking into the woods to visit a decaying tunnel with a documented ghost problem and 0 cell reception, Moonville's waiting for you. The rest of us? We'll stick to towns where the only thing haunting us is property taxes. And if you thought abandoned railroad tunnels were unsettling, wait until you meet the town where the ground itself is the problem. Number 9, Peacher, Oklahoma, poisoned from below. There are ghost towns, and then there's Peacher, Oklahoma, a place so toxic the federal government literally paid people to leave and never come back. Peacher used to be the definition of American prosperity. Lead and zinc mining put this town on the map in the early 1900s. During World War I and World War II, Peacher supplied more than half the lead used in American ammunition. Patriotic posters went up, paychecks rolled in, families settled down. For decades, this looked like the American dream with a hard hat and a lunch pail. But here's what nobody mentioned in those recruiting ads. The mines were carving out the ground beneath the town like a block of Swiss cheese. And when the mining finally stopped in the 1960s, what got left behind were mountains of toxic waste called chat piles, heaps of crushed rock laced with lead, zinc, and arsenic sitting in open air, blowing dust across playgrounds and schoolyards. By the 1990s, children in Peacher were testing positive for lead poisoning at rates the EPA called catastrophic. Over 1/3 of kids had elevated blood lead levels that caused developmental delays, learning disabilities, and lifelong health problems. The water wasn't safe, the soil wasn't safe, and underneath it, all those old mining tunnels were starting to collapse, creating sinkholes that could swallow cars, houses, entire streets without warning. In 2006, the Environmental Protection Agency declared Peacher one of the most toxic places in America and recommended total evacuation. The federal government offered buyouts, residents packed up what they could, and slowly, the town emptied out. Then in 2008, an EF4 tornado ripped through what little was left standing, and FEMA basically shrugged and said there's no point rebuilding this. Today, Peacher's population hovers near zero. The streets are cracked and overgrown. Homes sag into the poisoned earth. Chat piles still loom over empty lots like gravestones for a town that worked itself to death and took its people down with it. You want to talk about property value? In Peacher, it's not just low, it's non-existent. You literally cannot insure, finance, or sell real estate in a place the government classified as uninhabitable. It's not a housing market, it's a crime scene with a zip code. And here's the kicker, a few people refused to leave. Holdouts who couldn't let go or had nowhere else to go, they're still there, living in the rubble, breathing air that decades of studies say will kill them slowly. Peacher doesn't feel abandoned. It feels erased, like someone tried to delete it from the map mid-sentence and just walked away. You know it's bad when even natural disasters look at your town and go, yeah, we're done here. So if hiking through ghost tunnels isn't your speed, maybe living on top of a collapsing toxic waste dump is more your vibe. Either way, next time someone complains about their rent, just remind them, at least their backyard isn't a super fun sight. But if you think Peacher's toxic nightmare is as bad as it gets, buckle up, because the next town isn't just contaminated, it's on fire. And it's been burning for over 60 years. Centralia, Pennsylvania, used to be a quiet coal mining town. Hardworking families, a couple churches, Friday night football, all the small town staples. Then, in May 1962, someone lit a trash fire in an old abandoned mine pit to clean it up before Memorial Day. Standard practice back then. Except this time, the fire spread into an exposed vein of coal underground, and that coal seam runs for miles. Efforts to extinguish it failed. They tried water, they tried digging, they tried everything short of divine intervention. Nothing worked. The fire kept spreading, deeper, wider, hotter. By the 1980s, smoke was venting through cracks in the street. Sinkholes started opening up without warning. Carbon monoxide levels spiked. The ground temperature in some areas hit over 900 degrees Fahrenheit. In 1984, Congress allocated $42 million to relocate residents. Most took the buyout and left. The town's zip code, 17927, was officially revoked in 2002, erasing Centralia from postal existence. But not everyone left. A handful of residents refused to go, and they're still there, living in a town the government says doesn't exist. On ground that's literally on fire. Here are the numbers that should make you reconsider any romantic notions about this place. The fire currently covers an estimated 400 acres and is still spreading. The underground coal seam could keep burning for another 250 years. Population dropped from over 1,000 to fewer than 5. Property values? Let's just say you can't get a mortgage on a house that might collapse into a pit of burning coal. But here's what nobody tells you about Centralia until you're standing there. The air smells wrong. Sulfuric, metallic, like you're breathing in a warning. White smoke rises from cracks in the pavement, like special effects from a low-budget apocalypse movie. The few remaining homes sit crooked, their foundations shifting as the ground beneath them turns to ash. And the highway. Pennsylvania, Route 61 used to run straight through Centralia. Now it's been rerouted, and the old section, known as Graffiti Highway, became a surreal tourist attraction covered in spray paint and cautionary tales until the state finally buried it under truckloads of dirt in 2020 to keep people from standing on hot, unstable ground. Living in Centralia isn't just dangerous, it's stubborn to the point of self-destruction. The people who stayed aren't there because it's safe or logical. They're there because it's home, even if home is actively trying to kill them. And let's be honest, how do you even ensure that? Hi, yes, I'd like fire coverage. Ongoing? Yes. For 60 years? Also yes, it's not in the house, it's underneath the house, everywhere, forever. Picture this. You step outside on a cold morning. The air should be crisp, clean. Instead, it's thick with vapor rising from the frozen ground like something out of Silent Hill. You walk your dog, carefully avoiding the vents marked with warning signs, and you realize the warmth under your feet isn't from the sun, it's from hell working its way up. Centralia is proof that sometimes the scariest thing isn't what's haunting a town, it's what's consuming it from below while everyone pretends it's fine. But if underground fires seem like an isolated problem, the next place proves that sometimes the curse isn't the land, it's the name itself. Number 7. Dudleytown, Connecticut. The forest that doesn't want you. There's a reason Dudleytown doesn't show up on your GPS, and it's not a technical glitch. It's a warning the algorithm actually respects. Dudleytown, Connecticut is the kind of place that shouldn't exist, and according to most maps, it doesn't. No street signs, no official town. Records, no zip code. Just a name whispered between campfire stories, paranormal forums, and true crime podcasts about cursed places where logic goes to die. Founded in the mid-17th century by the Dudley family, English settlers with alleged noble blood and a reputation for bad luck that followed them across the Atlantic. The village they built in the hills of northwestern Connecticut seemed doomed from the start. Crop failures, livestock dying for no reason, residents going mad, disappearing into the woods, or taking their own lives at rates that didn't match any explainable pattern. By the early 1900s, everyone was gone. Not relocated, just gone. And no one ever rebuilt. Trees grew over foundations, roads vanished into underbrush, and the land was eventually sealed off. Today, it's part of a private land trust called Dark Entry Forest, because of course it is, and visitors are technically trespassing if they enter. But that doesn't stop people from trying. Paranormal investigators, thrill seekers, true crime enthusiasts, they all make the pilgrimage, and a lot of them report the same things. Camera equipment malfunctions, GPS fails, compasses spin, people lose track of time, wander in circles, or leave feeling nauseous and disoriented without explanation. One visitor described it like this on a Connecticut hiking forum. Went in on a dare, GPS died, phone camera glitched out, and I heard nothing but wind, except there was no wind. Just this low hum that felt like it was coming from inside my head. Left after 20 minutes, never going back. There's no rent, no property value, no economic data, because technically there's no town. But Dudleytown costs you in other ways. People talk about the silence there, not peaceful silence, but the kind that presses on your ears like something's listening. The forest doesn't feel neutral, it feels aware. And here's the thing that gets under people's skin. It's not falling apart, it's just not growing back. Vegetation is thick, but it's wrong. Twisted, dense, like the land is trying to cover something instead of reclaim it. Hikers report feeling watched, not by animals, but by something patient and still. The local name for the area, Dark Entry Forest, sounds like it was named by someone who failed a creative writing class but nailed the ominous vibes assignment. If you're branding your neighborhood with a title that doubles as a rejected horror novel, don't act shocked when people assume it's haunted. There's no official record of deaths, disappearances, or supernatural activity in Dudleytown, but the absence of records is its own kind of evidence. When a whole settlement just stops and no one bothers to explain why, people fill in the gaps. And those gaps are never flattering. Picture this, you're hiking alone. The trail is overgrown, barely visible. No birds, no insects, just thick, humid air and trees pressing in like walls. Your phone's dead. You're sure you passed that same fallen log 10 minutes ago. You call out for your friend who was right behind you, but there's no answer, just that hum. Low, steady, wrong. Centralia burns. Peacher poisons. Dudley Town just waits. And honestly, I don't know which one's worse. But if haunted forests aren't doing it for you, the next town took isolation, cranked it to 11, and said, what if we all just lived in one building and never left? Number 6, Whittier, Alaska, the town inside a tower. There's a town in Alaska where 90% of the population lives inside one building. Not a co-op, not a dorm. A full-on vertical city where your mayor, your mailman, and your ex all live 3 floors apart and there's no escape. Welcome to Whittier, Alaska. Population roughly 272. Housing options? 1. The Begich Towers. A 14-story Cold War relic built in 1956 as a military installation, now functioning as apartment complex, city hall, school, post office, grocery store, police station, medical clinic, church, and probably the setting of your next nightmare about forced community bonding. You want isolation? Whittier's got it. The only way in or out is through a 2.5-mile tunnel through a mountain, the Anton Anderson Memorial Tunnel, and it closes at night. If you miss the last opening, you're stuck. If there's an avalanche, you're stuck. If someone just decides to close it early, you're stuck. It's like living in a snow globe someone occasionally shakes and forgets to open. Average winter temperature hovers around 15 degrees Fahrenheit, but with wind chill, it regularly drops below 0. Annual snowfall exceeds 250 inches. That's over 20 feet of snow. In a place where the sun disappears for weeks and reappears like it forgot where it parked. Rent inside the Begich Towers runs between $600 to $900 a month, which sounds reasonable until you realize your entire social life, work life, and private life happen within the same concrete hallways. You can't avoid your neighbors, you can't ghost your landlord, you will hear Mrs. Henderson's TV through your bedroom wall every single night, and there's nothing you can do about it. The economy is built on port operations, government jobs, and seasonal tourism. When the cruise ships dock in summer, Whittier briefly remembers it's a destination. When they leave, it goes back to being a bunker with a view. Crime rate? Technically low, because where would you run? The tunnel shuts at night, and outside the building is either frozen ocean or bear territory. This is the only town in America where committing a crime guarantees you'll see your victim at breakfast the next morning. And here's what no one tells you until you live there. The building is connected by underground tunnels, so you never have to go outside. School, church, work, groceries, all accessible in slippers and sweatpants. Sounds efficient until you realize you haven't breathed outdoor air in a week and you're starting to forget what the sun looks like. One resident described it perfectly. Living in Whittier is like being in a submarine, except the submarine never docks, and everyone knows when you order pizza. Let me paint the full picture. You wake up, shuffle to the communal hallway, grab your mail, wave at the mayor who's also your upstairs neighbor, drop your kid off at school without stepping outside, pick up milk from the store on the 2nd floor, and head home. It's convenient, it's claustrophobic, it's a social experiment disguised as affordable housing. And the tunnel. Let's talk about the tunnel. It's one lane, shared by cars going both directions on a timed schedule. You wait your turn. You drive through a pitch-black tube carved through a mountain. You emerge into a town that feels like the end of a choose-your-own-adventure book, where you made every wrong choice. Whittier isn't creepy because it's dangerous. It's creepy because it's too efficient, like someone designed a city for survivors of an apocalypse that never came, and now everyone's just stuck pretending this is normal. Would you live in a building where your entire existence is on display, or would you tunnel out on day 2? Because honestly, after hearing about Whittier, I'm starting to think haunted forests might offer more privacy. But if Whittier makes you feel trapped, the next town literally tried to exist and failed before it even got started. Number 5. Fallsville, Ohio, the town that didn't even try. Fallsville, Ohio is a ghost town with one very specific problem. It was never really a town to begin with. It's the participation trophy of American settlements. Showed up, got named, gave up. Settled in the early 1800s with all the optimism of westward expansion, natural waterfalls, decent land, big dreams. Except the railroad never came. Industry never happened. Investors looked at Fallsville and said, "Nah, we're good." And by 1890, everyone just quietly left. No dramatic collapse, no disease outbreak, no economic catastrophe, just slow, collective realization that this place wasn't going to work out. Today, Fallsville is technically part of the Fallsville Wildlife Area, which is a polite way of saying it returned to the earth. A few crumbling stone foundations, a dried-up creek, some trails with names like Dead Man's Hollow because Ohio has a sense of humor, and an overwhelming vibe that you're not supposed to be there. There's no census data, no real estate listings, no crime statistics, because there's no one left to commit crimes or report them. Just woods, ruins, and a 20-foot waterfall that sounds peaceful in theory, but feels ominous when you're standing there alone, realizing your cell service just died and your GPS is spinning like it's confused. Hikers who ventured into the area report the same thing. It's too quiet, not nature quiet, where you hear birds and rustling leaves, empty quiet, like the forest is holding its breath. People describe feeling watched, not by animals, but by something that doesn't move. One hiker posted on Reddit, "Walked into Fallsville Wildlife Area, felt wrong immediately. Like the trees were too close and the air was too still. Didn't see anything, but I swear something was tracking me. Turned around after 15 minutes and didn't stop until I hit the main road." Falls doesn't have the tragic backstory of Centralia or the toxic horror of Peacher. It's just a place that tried to exist, couldn't, and instead of fading gracefully, it became the kind of location where nature quietly reclaimed the land but left the bad vibes intact. There's something deeply unsettling about a town that failed so early and so completely that even the land feels confused about what it's supposed to be. It's not haunted, it's just unfinished, like a sentence that stops mid-thought and never picks back up. Picture this: you're hiking a trail that's barely marked. The path narrows. You spot what looks like an old cellar door, moss-covered, half-buried. The air gets colder even though the sun's still out. You don't see anyone, but every instinct you have says, "Turn around." So you do. And the trail behind you suddenly looks different than it did 5 minutes ago. Centralia burns, Peacher poisons, Dudleytown watches, Fallsville just gave up, and somehow that's more disturbing than all of them. But if a town that quit before it started sounds weird, wait until you hear about the place where people don't quit, they just vanish into thin air. Number 4, Nome, Alaska, where people disappear. At what point do missing person cases stop feeling like bad luck and start feeling like a pattern? Nome, Alaska might have the answer, and trust me, you won't like it. Nome sits on the edge of the Bering Sea, remote, icy, and disconnected from the rest of civilization in ways most Americans can't even imagine. There are no highways that connect Nome to the rest of Alaska, none. If you want in or out, you fly, you boat, or you sled. That's it. The town exists in isolation, which might sound romantic until you realize it's also where people go missing at rates that don't make sense. Since the 1960s, at least 24 people, mostly Alaska Native residents, have vanished from Nome without a trace. No bodies, no evidence, no closure, just gone. And when I say gone, I mean FBI cold case files, national media coverage, conspiracy theories, and a horror movie, The Fourth Kind, that tried to explain it with alien abductions. The theories range from the plausible to the paranoid. Hypothermia, sure, Alaska's brutal. Alcohol-related accidents, statistically likely. Serial killers, possible. Alien abduction, less likely, but more cinematic. The truth, no one knows. And that's what makes Nome so deeply unsettling. The answers never come. Nome by the numbers. Population around 3,600, average winter temperature minus 10 degrees Fahrenheit before wind chill. Cost of living 62% higher than the US average because everything has to be flown or shipped in. Major industries, gold mining, fishing, education. Unsolved disappearances, at least 24 since 1960. Living in Nome isn't just about surviving the cold, it's about existing in a place where search parties fail, where drones can't cover enough ground, where the tundra is so vast and unforgiving that entire humans can just vanish into it like they were never there. Locals say if you're going hiking, hunting, or even just walking too far from town, you leave a note. You tell people where you're going and when you'll be back, because if you don't return by dark, that's it. Search and rescue launches fast, but even they admit the odds aren't great. The landscape is too big, too hostile, and too indifferent to human life. Nome has 3 bars, 1 small hospital, no Starbucks, and a nightlife that consists mostly of people trying not to freeze to death. If you're expecting excitement, you're in the wrong state. If you're expecting safety, well, the missing person statistics say otherwise. And here's the part that keeps people awake at night. Some of those disappearances happened in broad daylight, in town, in populated areas, not deep in the wilderness where you'd expect nature to win. People just stopped existing, mid-conversation, mid-errand, mid-life, and no one's been able to explain how or why. Picture this. You step outside into blinding white tundra. The air is so cold it burns your lungs. You can see for miles nothing but snow and sky. You feel alone, completely alone, until you don't. There's no one around, but the sensation of being watched crawls up your spine like frost. Nome isn't haunted by ghosts, it's haunted by the absence of answers. And sometimes that's worse. But if people vanishing into thin air sounds like the peak of unsettling, the next town makes disappearance look voluntary, because what happened there was intentional, systematic, and still, decades later, no one's giving a straight answer. Number 3. Cairo, Illinois, the city that canceled itself. Cairo, Illinois isn't haunted by ghosts. It's haunted by choices, consequences, and the kind of silence that comes when a whole city decides to walk away from itself. Cairo, pronounced like the syrup, not the Egyptian capital, sits at the southern tip of Illinois, where the Mississippi and Ohio rivers meet. That location should have made it a booming port city, an economic powerhouse. Instead, Cairo is one of the most heartbreaking examples of how racism, corruption, and mismanagement can kill a town from the inside out. In the 1920s, Cairo had over 15,000 residents. It was known as Little Chicago, bustling, prosperous, full of opportunity. Then came the civil rights movement, and Cairo didn't handle it well. Racial tension exploded into violence. White flight drained the tax base. Businesses closed, federal funding dried up. By the 1980s, the city was collapsing. Cairo today has fewer than 1,700 residents, and that number's still dropping. Entire blocks are abandoned. Grand Victorian mansions, once symbols of wealth, now sag with broken windows and caving roofs. The downtown is a graveyard of boarded storefronts. There's no grocery store, no movie theater, no functional economy to speak of. The numbers are brutal. Unemployment rate 3 times the state average. Median household income under $20,000. Median home price around $33,000, but good luck finding a buyer. Who wants to invest in a place that's been dying for 50 years? And yet, people still live there. Not many, but enough to keep the lights on in a few scattered homes. They stay because it's home, because they can't afford to leave, or because leaving would mean admitting defeat. Living in Cairo feels like being an extra in a post-apocalyptic film that never got a proper ending. The infrastructure is crumbling. Public housing has been demolished. Essential services barely exist. The major employers are the county jail, the school district, and a FedEx distribution hub. That's it. And here's the thing that'll haunt you. Cairo didn't collapse because of a natural disaster or economic crash. It collapsed because people chose to let it die rather than fight to fix it. The town didn't lose a battle, it forfeited. Picture this. You walk down a street lined with once beautiful homes. Porches sag, paint peels, windows are dark. You hear your own footsteps echo. Even the birds seem to avoid this place. The air feels heavy, like the history here is too thick to breathe through. Cairo is the kind of town that makes you ask hard questions about what we owe each other, about what happens when a community chooses division over survival, and about whether some places can ever come back from the edge. But if Cairo is a slow, tragic unraveling, the next town is a fast, chaotic mystery that still doesn't have an ending anyone believes. Number 2, Helltown, Ohio. The evacuation no one can explain. How do you evacuate an entire town overnight, seal the roads, and never give a straight answer why? Welcome to Helltown, Ohio, where the official story doesn't match the vibe, and the vibe is deeply, deeply wrong. Let's start with the name. it's real. The locals call it Helltown, and while that's technically a nickname for the Boston Township area that got abandoned, it's stuck because it fits. In 1974, the federal government declared eminent domain over a section of this community, supposedly to expand Cuyahoga Valley National Park. They bought properties, evicted residents, and then just left. The houses sat empty. Roads were barricaded, no trespassing signs went up everywhere. And here's where it gets weird, they never finished the park expansion. Buildings rotted in place for decades, becoming magnets for urban explorers, paranormal investigators, and teenagers with bad judgment. The rumors are wild. Satanic cults, performing rituals in the old church, government chemical spills that poison the land, mutant creatures living in the woods, a bus full of children that never made it out. None of it's been confirmed, but none of it's been debunked either, and that's the problem. Official records say the buyouts were for environmental conservation. But why leave the buildings standing? Why not tear them down and actually expand the park? Why barricade roads but not patrol them? The explanations don't add up, and when answers don't add up, people fill in the gaps. By the early 2000s, most of the abandoned structures were demolished, but the paranoia never left. People still sneak into the area. They report hearing things that shouldn't be there, seeing lights in the woods, and experiencing technology failures, dead batteries, cameras glitching, GPS going haywire. One Reddit user posted, "Broke into the old church at 2 in the morning. The trees were silent, like actually silent. No wind, no animals. Then something hissed at us from inside. We ran, never went back." There's no population data for Helltown, because officially it doesn't exist as a town anymore. Crime rate technically 0 because there's no one there to commit crimes. But trespassing? That's a given. And the consequences aren't legal, they're psychological. People leave Helltown feeling like something followed them home. Picture this, you're driving down a cracked, overgrown road. Every house is dark, boarded up. The trees press in so close they block the sky. You stop the car, your phone dies. A church looms ahead, its windows empty, its door hanging open. And you think, nope? Helltown is the only place where a no trespassing sign feels like it's doing you a favor. It's the kind of location that dares you to enter and punishes you for accepting. But if Helltown is a town that disappeared under suspicious circumstances, the final place on this list took disappearance to its logical extreme. Population, 1. And somehow that's not even the strangest part. Number 1. Manawai, Nebraska, the town with 1 resident. This isn't a ghost town, it's a one-person town, which somehow feels even more eerie. Welcome to Manawai, Nebraska, population exactly 1. Not an estimate, not a rounding error. 1. Her name is Elsie Eiler, and she is the mayor, the bartender, the librarian, the city planner, the taxpayer, and the only reason this town still technically exists. Manawai isn't abandoned in the traditional sense, it's functional. Elsie runs the Manawai Tavern, pays taxes to herself, grants herself a liquor license, and files municipal reports to the state of Nebraska like clockwork. She maintains a library in memory of her late husband, mows the grass in the town park, and keeps the lights on in a place that should have dissolved decades ago. The town peaked in the 1930s with a population of 150. By the 1980s, that number had dropped to under a dozen. In 2004, Elsie's husband passed away and she became the sole resident. She's been running the show solo ever since. Here's what makes Manawai unsettling. It's not creepy in the horror movie sense. There's no fire, no poison, no mystery. It's just profoundly, deeply empty. The kind of empty that makes you question what a town even is when there's no one left to share it with. Crime rate? 0 unless Elsie's committing crimes against herself, which she's not. Property taxes? She pays them to herself annually. Elections? 100% voter turnout every time. It's democracy in its purest and most absurd form. The tavern is real, functional, and surprisingly busy during summer months when travelers stop in for a burger and a beer, mostly because they can't believe this place exists. Elsie greets them, cooks their food, pours their drinks, and probably enjoys the company before they leave, and she's alone again. Picture this. You walk outside. It's dawn. The wind rustles a cornfield. You go to the bar. The bartender waves. It's you. You forgot. You're working today, you're also the only customer. You pour yourself a drink, file a noise complaint against yourself, and approve it immediately. Manawai isn't haunted by the past. It's haunted by the present, by the reality that one person is keeping an entire municipal structure alive out of sheer stubbornness and love for a place that no longer exists in any meaningful way. And here's the emotional gut punch. Elsie isn't lonely. She's content. She chose this. Every day she chooses to stay, to run the tavern, to maintain the library, to keep Manawai on the map, even though the map doesn't care. Manawai is proof that sometimes the scariest thing about a small town isn't what haunts it. It's what keeps it alive when it should have died decades ago. So there you have it. 10 small towns across America that exist in that uncomfortable space between reality and warning label. Some are poisoned, some are burning, some just vanished. And one is run entirely by a woman who's basically the embodiment of fine, I'll do it myself. These places aren't tourist attractions, they're reminders that not every American story ends with prosperity and progress. Sometimes the story just stops, and what's left behind is either a cautionary tale, a mystery, or a single bartender pouring drinks in an empty town because someone has to. Would you visit any of these places? Would you stay the night? Would you move to a town with a population of 1 just for the low rent and high weirdness? Drop your answers in the comments. Let me know which town creeped you out the most, and hit subscribe because next time you're planning a road trip, you'll want to know which exits to skip. Until next time, stay safe out there, and maybe avoid any town that's been on fire since the Kennedy administration. Just a thought.